Get ready, because we are diving into one of the biggest dramas in intellectual history. It's the story of a revolutionary thinker and the two brilliant students who would eventually challenge everything he stood for. And in doing so, they basically changed how we see our own minds. Forever.
But before we get into all that, let me ask you something. Who is actually in the driver's seat of your mind? Is it your conscious, rational self calling the shots? Or is there something else? Some deeper, hidden force pulling the strings behind the scenes? This very question is what obsessed the three thinkers we're looking at today.
I mean, you've got to remember, a little over a century ago, our inner world was pretty much uncharted territory, a total mystery. And into that darkness, one man lit a torch: Sigmund Freud. By mixing what he saw in his clinic with some really bold speculation, he basically invented the first modern theory of what makes us, well, us. Let's start with his game-changing approach. All right, first up, the man himself, Sigmund Freud. And let me tell you, his work wasn't just groundbreaking for its time, it is still wildly controversial to this day. It all started with an approach he called psychoanalysis.
So, what exactly is psychoanalysis? Well, at its heart, it's a method for digging into the unconscious. He worked with a colleague, Joseph Breuer, and learned about this thing called catharsis, the idea that just talking out your problems can make you feel better. But he soon developed his own signature technique, free association. Instead of hypnosis, he would just have his patients talk, say whatever popped into their heads, no matter how weird or random it seemed. He was convinced it was like a secret hotline to their hidden thoughts and desires.
And this is where we get to Freud's biggest, most explosive idea. He believed our behavior isn't just random, it's driven by these super powerful unconscious forces. And the main one he claimed was the sexual drive, or what he called libido. But hold on, for Freud, this wasn't just about what you're thinking. He argued that basically any pleasure, enjoying a great meal, making art, you name it, it all came from this one single primal drive.
But, Freud's journey wasn't some smooth, straight line. Not at all. He hit this massive crisis in his mid-40s. He was chasing this theory that all neuroses, all these emotional problems, were caused by actual seduction in childhood. He was so sure he'd found the key, but the theory just wasn't working. It was falling apart, and that failure forced him to completely rethink everything.
And what's really fascinating is how brutally honest he was about it in a letter to a friend. He laid out 4 big reasons for ditching his theory. First off, he admitted it never actually cured a single patient, not one. Second, if he was right, it meant a horrifying number of fathers, including his own, were predators, and he just couldn't accept that. Third, and this is a big one, he realized that the unconscious mind doesn't really know the difference between fantasy and reality. And finally, the evidence just wasn't there. So dropping this whole idea, it actually paved the way for one of his most famous, and most controversial concepts, the Oedipus complex.
Okay, so Freud has built this whole world where our past and our biology are basically king. But not everyone in his inner circle was buying it. And that brings us to our first rebel, Alfred Adler, who had a totally different take on what makes us tick. And this slide just lays out the split between them perfectly. See, Freud was all about causality. He thought we were basically pushed around by things that happen in our past, by these biological instincts. Adler? He was on a totally different page. He believed in teleology, the idea that we're being pulled forward by our goals, by who we want to become. For Adler, it's not about where you've been, it's about where you're headed.
And you know what? Adler's own life is the perfect example of his theory. He was a sickly kid, and at 5 years old, he almost died from pneumonia. But hearing the doctor tell his parents, "The boy is lost," that didn't crush him. No, it lit a fire under him. It gave him a goal. It drove him to overcome that physical weakness and become a doctor himself. He wasn't just a victim of his past sickness. He was actively being pulled toward his future as a healer.
And this idea that we can shape our own lives is right at the heart of what Adler called creative power. He had this great analogy for it, the law of the low doorway. Think about it. If you come to a doorway that's too low, you have a choice, right? You can learn to duck, or you can just keep smashing your head against it. For Adler, life is just full of these low doorways, and we always have that creative power to choose how we're going to deal with them.
So if Adler's break with Freud was like an intellectual divorce, the split with our next guy, Carl Jung, oh, that was deeply, deeply personal. You see, Freud had picked Jung to be his successor. He was the crown prince of psychoanalysis, which just made their eventual breakup all the more dramatic.
Even as a kid, Jung felt like he was two people in one. On the one hand, there was personality number one,
the everyday schoolboy living in the present. But then there was this number 2 personality, this wise, ancient old man who seemed to come from another time. And this feeling, this duality, it was a major clue for where his thinking would eventually go.
Now, the relationship between Freud and Jung was wow. It was intense. Jung actually wrote to Freud and confessed that his admiration for him was like a religious crush, and even had what he called an undeniable erotic undertone, and he connected this intense feeling to a terrible experience from his youth when he was sexually assaulted by an older man he had looked up to. You can just imagine how this incredibly complex personal stuff probably poured gasoline on the fire of their eventual falling out.
And this is where Jung really breaks away. He didn't just tweak Freud's ideas, he completely redrew the map of the human mind. He said, okay, sure, we have a personal unconscious, our own memories and feelings, but underneath that, there's something much deeper, something he called the collective unconscious. He saw it as this shared reservoir of memories and images that we all inherit from our ancestors, from the entire history of our species, packed with these universal symbols he called archetypes.
But Jung wasn't just some abstract theorist. He created practical tools, too. Take his word association test. It was basically a way to go hunting for what he called complexes. You know, those emotionally charged knots of thought we all have. So he'd read a list of 100 words, and he'd be watching everything. How long does it take you to answer? How's your breathing? Are you blushing? A long pause, a stutter, a failure to respond at all. Any of these could be a little red flag, a sign that the word just hit a raw nerve buried deep in the unconscious.
And this right here, this is probably Jung's most famous legacy, something you've almost definitely run into. He came up with 2 basic attitudes, extroversion and introversion, and then 4 ways we experience the world: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. You can see on the slide how when you mix and match them, you get these 8 basic psychological types. Sound familiar? It should. This is the direct ancestor of tests like the Myers-Briggs that are so popular today.
So, there you have it. You start with one revolutionary thinker, and from that single point you get 3 giants of psychology who carved out 3 totally different paths. Sure, they fractured the whole movement, but in doing so they left behind this incredibly rich and complicated legacy that we're still grappling with. So let's just boil it all down, right? You had Freud, who said it's all about the unconscious sexual drive, and that we're basically pushed by our past. Then you have Adler, who believed we're all about striving to be better, that we're pulled toward our future goals. And finally, there's Jung, with his idea of a collective unconscious, arguing that we're all on this quest for wholeness, trying to balance our inner and outer worlds.
And all of this brings us right back to that question I asked at the very beginning. Who's really in the driver's seat? Is it Freud's version, with all these hidden drives from your childhood pushing you along? Is it Adler's, with your future goals pulling you forward? Or is it Jung's idea, that there are these ancient universal symbols shaping you from deep within? It's amazing. These ideas are a century old, and they are still battling it out for how we understand ourselves. So the real question isn't just who's in the driver's seat, it's which one of them is driving you.